Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. He plays Magic the Gathering for the fantasy escapism, so he's really happy to see stuff like the new card called Rent is Due. It's Matt Morgan.
So a clumsy paleontologist walked onto the stage with the dinosaur skull, and what happened next is absolutely jaw-dropping.
Oh no! Oh, what
I told
an
you it
image.
was clumsy. I didn't fumble that joke, did I? I didn't.
No, Matt, there's no bones about it. That's one of the best jokes that you've told here in a while. That's
what I want to hear.
Oh, terrific. All right, Matt, it's the two of us on this show. What are we talking about in this episode, man?
So we just got done playing at MagicCon Atlanta. It was a fantastic weekend. I got enough games in that I actually kind of got to feel like I participated. But every now and then we see some random house rules, and we wanted to kind of follow up about that and see if there were any house rules that cropped up for you at the, playing games this weekend, or just kind of weird house rules that we kind of hear propping up every now and then.
Yeah, this is a thing every so often. I feel like you can go online, maybe on a place like Reddit, and you'll see a thread about like some really interesting house rules. And there are some that a lot of folks will say, oh, that seems like pretty chill, pretty low-key. And then there's some others that go, is off the rails a polite way to say it, maybe? There are some wild ones out there.
They go further off the rails than an Aether Drift vehicle card.
Sure, yeah, precisely. So we want to kind of cast a wide net here and go over some house rules that we think are pretty chill, some stuff that we do enjoy when we see it, that we're kind of game for that, and then also some ones that we're like, okay, let's actually try and unpack what's really going on here. So house rules as a topic. Matt, maybe we start easy. Maybe we start with one that's a little bit chill compared to some of the wilder ones that we're going to get to later on in the episode. So what's an easy house rule that we think we should start with here?
Oh, so you did find some juicy ones that we'll get into, but let's I agree. Let's start with some that at least we can endorse. The first one that I think is kind of shocking, actually, that people kind of act surprised when you present it to them, is just get a good 7. Every time that I'm playing with people at Magic Cons and somebody like has to mulligan, like, oh, I can't draw any lands, whatever. I want to give people most of the time the benefit of the doubt. And if we're at a Magic Con, people aren't trying to generally pub stomp and do stuff like that. So if people are struggling, especially if they're a newer player, I will always endorse just draw a good 7. Just, you don't get a good 7, put that set aside, draw a new 7. Maybe you'll get 3 lands, keep that. Yeah. That's kind of in the spirit, in my mind, of just how Commander was meant to be anyways. I know Sheldon Menery always said, just mulligan until you get at least 3 lands, and then go from there. Just don't abuse it. And as long as people aren't abusing it, I will always tell people, just get a playable 7.
That's the main thing. Like, when people, I think, hear a rule like this, you anticipate all the ways that it could be abused. And like, if you're just mulliganing infinitely, you can just find your best hand. But also, everyone else at the table can see you. And so, like, sort of that, I think it's Command Zone has a rule, just like, get a good 7, but if you then get a Soul Ring, no. Like, because that's a very clear, easy moniker of just like, well, clearly you mulliganed until you could get a Soul Ring, which is not the vibe that we want. So mulligan till you get something that is like appropriate, not something that is just like, okay, so you were sculpting. And that don't abuse it is a very comfortable thing to see. And that is, I think, very much in the spirit of a quote house rule, where it is like a play group that you can trust, that you're all here trying to focus on having a good time rather than trying to focus on something more cutthroat, I suppose.
Yeah, well, and every time that I play with somebody new for the first time, like, I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to like pass judgment ahead of time, unless like I've had a conversation that gives me a very good reason to cast doubt and press X for the doubt. Sure. But otherwise, I'm always going to say, like, if you're struggling, if you can't get it, just set that top side, because obviously if you're shuffling things back in, there might be something you want. Prevent that abuse a little bit. So make sure you protect yourself a little bit, but generally just play 7 cards that like are just going to let you play the game. Because the worst thing in my mind is you play a first game with somebody and they just don't get to play because their deck didn't want to cooperate. I hate seeing that, especially again for the new players, and that's where we, as the more invested people, you and I, or probably just generally the people that are listening to the show, we can kind of model that like good behavior and encourage people like, hey, let's just play the game because that's what we're here to do.
I will say that like once we're into like a bracket 4 or bracket 5 space, like we've optimized this or we're playing something
changes the math. Yeah, absolutely.
Completely. So this is very much a rule that like, at bracket 2, if we're playing with precons or like precon adjacent or a little bit of upgrades, I'm just like, I'm here for a good night. I'm having, just like dinner and a chill time with my buddies. I'm not going to take this too seriously. So that's very much in the spirit of this vibe. And a place like the Magic Con Atlanta, or just like being at a con, getting a quick game in before you run to an event or you go get lunch. That's the kind of thing I'm just like, I'm here for a quick, nice time, so I'm not going to stress too much about this. That's very much the vibe for this type of thing. But once we do go into we move into a more competitive bracket, I guess we could say, then I'm going to be like, no, I don't want to encourage this so much that it encourages us to build our decks in a way that takes advantage of a rule like this.
Yeah, it's abusable if you make that the norm, for sure. Because if you're playing with people who like typically tend to take advantage of that, that's where you kind of want to get a little, maybe not do that. But also, again, if it's first exposure, I want to be a little graceful with that. If it's CEDH, absolutely not. That is where truly like the attitude, everybody's going in like, but you're also not building CEDH by accident. And so you're building a deck very intentionally. So for me, this is the one exclusion to this house rule that I kind of like, where get a playable 7 unless we're playing CEDH. Then, I mean, we all have that understanding. We built our decks with this, and we're not trying to abuse that. So yeah, CEDH, I do have that hard cutoff there.
Yeah. I think kind of related to this is another pretty chill house rule that comes up a lot. I think this is very, very common, especially in the commander space, is just like a sort of casual attitude towards takebacks. If you make a move and you're just like, oh, I tapped this wrong, for instance, would be a really easy way of like, oh, can I change the way I tap my mana on here? That tends to be a very laissez-faire attitude at a lot of the tables that I play at.
Yeah, I don't mind takebacks, especially at brackets 2, stuff like that. And again, I played with a lot of newer players in Atlanta, so this is especially just top of my mind. But there were a couple of times somebody would cast a board wipe, and the player looked around and was like, oh, well, like, that doesn't actually solve, because it was something on board that was preventing the problem player from actually suffering from the board wipe. So the board wipe was actually just going to king make in this situation. And so the player was like, well, so that doesn't even like fix what was happening. It wasn't like they cast heroic intervention in response. They just misplayed. They shouldn't have cast the board wipe. And so
I didn't see that thing on your board over there diagonally across the table from me. I didn't realize that that's what your card does.
Yeah.
Also the kind of thing that happens all the time. Sure, I understand that.
Yeah, and so two of the, like myself and another buddy of mine, we were like, just put that back in your hand, untap the mana. Like you're learning the game. It is totally understandable. And so I want to be gracious when it comes to like takebacks or something like very obviously like I wasn't thinking, I wasn't reading, or I didn't know that it worked that way, especially if it's a rules interaction, because this game is so complex.
It's so
I don't want to like hang, I don't want to leave people out hanging just because they didn't understand how like specific rules work sometimes, because that creates terrible experiences.
You mean you don't know all of the new intricate rules around my brand new Spider-Man card that literally just released that you've never seen before?
I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do think that like also too laissez-faire of an attitude towards takebacks can sometimes be maybe a little bit tedious would possibly be the word for some play groups. So sometimes something that I've done with like my home play group is like we'll have a limit of just like no more than 3.
Yeah.
Like let's not, if you get past a third takeback of the night, it's a little bit like, okay, what's going on here? So like having like a cap on that can sometimes be a cute way of being like, hey now, make sure that we're playing this game in a way that encourages us to get better at the game, not just to do whatever and be too lazy about, there's something compelling about upgrading and growing as you play. And another thing, and this is kind of silly, we have sometimes implemented the idea of a, quote, take-back shot, where like, all right, yeah, you can do a take-back, but you got to take a shot. And it like, is it when we're really in the mood for like a very loosey-goosey type of evening?
Sure,
like,
yeah.
We're packing humor into the moment to like call attention to it in a way that is a little bit like, you probably don't want to like establish this as a norm. Like, don't always do this, but it can be something funny. That is a nice approach that I find for some of these house rules. Is like, can we bend them in a way that's still funny and humorous for people?
I do like setting a cap, and in my play group we've done the everybody gets one. It's kind of that Spider-Man rule where you get one mess up, just because like if you don't know how the rule works or whatever. I remember I was watching a player first play against Knowledge Pool, and it was especially frustrating for him to say, okay, like you don't understand this card, like this is how it's going to work. If you want to do that, do you still want to do that thing? And they were like, well, very obviously no. So okay, let's rewind it then. You know how it works now, so we can play around in the future. So yeah, just making sure we're not punishing people for not understanding every single rule or trying to figure it out. I want people to be able to learn and grow, and not letting people make mistakes. That's how you learn and grow.
Yeah. And an interesting thing on takebacks here that is probably worth us noting, once there's new information that's been presented as a result of a game action you took, then I'm going to be like, like that's...
Yeah.
like if I'm casting a Reclamation Sage, I don't have to declare my target until it has hit the battlefield. So then if I play Reclamation Sage and it resolves, and then I say I'm going to destroy your artifact, you cannot counterspell me. Like there's a difference in like quote takebacks there or something like that. New information being discovered is the kind of thing that is good to keep in mind there. There are certain types of takebacks that are like clearly inspired, as you said, by this is information I didn't quite realize. It's we're playing in a bar or something like that, so it's very loud and rowdy. That's a different creature to, brand new information has been revealed by another player, and that player would not have behaved the way that they did had they known, given what your action they thought was going to be. So like there's a difference that I do want to make sure that we highlight there for this particular type of role.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you do something, you say you want to do that, and then new information is presented, like say that person does cast the board wipe, and then the heroic intervention happens.
Yeah,
that no, you don't get to take back then. Yeah, no. That's kind of beyond what we're going to like let you roll the punches on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great example. All right, so those are some chill ones. Those are some good ones that we're kind of like, yeah, I see where everyone's coming from on this.
Set the tone, yeah.
Yeah. We've got some wild ones to also get into. Before we do, I need to take a breather. How about we do some shout outs before we get we dive into the deep end of some house rules here, Matt?
Let's do it. Let's get there.
Up first, we are proud to be sponsored by Dragon Shield, who make amazing card sleeves, and they've just announced, Matt, we're so excited about this. They've just announced their new line of sleeves featuring officially licensed Magic the Gathering artwork, including stuff from like Tarkir Dragonstorm, the Dragon sleeves, and they've got a new batch of Fetchland art too. Matt, these are stunning. These are gorgeous. I'm so excited.
I've got two in front of my face right now, so if you want to see these are so handsome. I am so happy that we got to see them unveil. Like Dragon Shield, it used to be there was only one way you could get magic art on your sleeves on any of your accessories. That has changed, and Dragon Shield truly has changed the game when it comes to putting just magnificent art on the best sleeves that you can find anyways. Like we're kind of homers, but we like these people. We like the products they have over Dragon Shield. But now there truly is like no reason not to have Dragon Shield on just every deck that you own now.
The Verdant Catacombs art is so gorgeous. The Misty Rainforest is so
Misty
gorgeous.
Rainforest is great.
I could just keep going on and on and on. I really like this. And they've got that upcoming guild sleeve thing that's coming out in the future too. So like me as a Golgari player, I'm going to be just so set up for success here. Matt, I'm very excited. Dragon Shield, huge shout outs to you. We just absolutely freaking love your sleeves.
Yeah, so make sure click on the link in the description below. It'll take you right to them, and just use promo code EDHREC. So when these do become available, you can head Dragon Shield, buy these sleeves, get a little discount on them at the same time. Everything adds up there. But another thing that you can do that supports the podcast beyond using promo code EDHREC with Dragon Shield is liking and subscribing to these videos. You may have heard that YouTube's algorithm has actually gotten really wild lately. Viewership is down for a lot of your favorite creators. One thing that absolutely helps people out so much, and we truly do mean this, is subscribing. Leave a comment, like this video, share it with your friends. That's the best thing. Word of mouth helps us so much, especially with all the things that are going on all these different platforms. So make sure you like and subscribe to these videos. It helps us so stinking much. But if you are moved to, you can head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast and support us over there on Patreon and get yourself a little something in return for doing that. If you want to join our Discord community, there's games firing off all the time. We're talking about preview cards coming out, all these things and more. You can get over at patreon.com/EDHRECast, including getting in the running for the weekly patron shoutout of the week. And this week, we are going to give a very special name drop to Matthias Mogensen, who, Matthias, you have possibly the most powerful name this side of Matthew Morgan. And you can thank Joy, because Joy pulled this name. I was not involved in pulling of Matthias Mogensen. But thank you so much, Matthias, for all of your support, and keep it strong for all the MMs out there too.
Matthias Mogensen sounds like you if you were trying to come up with a really cool pen name for writing crime novels. Like, it sounds like an alter ego of Matt Morgan.
It could have been or if like Mads Mikkelsen and I had, another cousin, that could have been Matthias Mogensen. So Matthias, thank you so much for all of your support, and to all of our patrons. We truly do mean it when we say like we could not do this without all of you. So thank you so much to everybody who goes to patreon.com/EDHRECast.
100%. Okay, Matt, now it's time for us to start diving into the deep end here. I think that there are probably a lot of folks out there listening who kind of have like set a bet for themselves, like how many minutes until they mention that really infamous LGS with the crazy ban list type of situation. Like, I think we probably do just need to like, all right, let's tackle the big one. Here's the main entree, right?
When you say entree, though, like it truly is an entire meal. This ban list, I guess it's something that there's a store out there that kind of infamously got some attraction on social media as having this overly, I think it's overly complicated and ban list of like 200 cards plus. And that to me is just unwieldy.
Yeah, and like, I want to clarify, I understand if groups are kind of like, hey, in addition to the regular ban list, here are some cards that we're either fine with or cards we're kind of like, we just as a group want to avoid these. Like, little like extra dashes and like additions to that make sense to me. But over 200 doesn't really make sense to me. And banning entire mechanics doesn't really make sense to me. And beyond that, a ban list that is over 200 cards is hard for me to even keep in my brain, So this is, I don't care for this. This is not the kind of thing that I would ever be game for.
Anything that basically got more than 0 on the SALT scores is included in this list. That's kind of what it feels like, because there is a lot of stuff there. There's a bunch of game changers on this list. There's a bunch of stacks pieces and all that, which somebody keeps this list up to date over on Archidect. So we'll link in the show notes here. I feel like the list also here kind of really gets taken care of with the bracket conversation. And so I'm curious if in the past year, this ban list that has kind of gone around has evolved and maybe some of these cards have gotten taken off. Because there's also stuff, there's a rule on this list of no Infect. Well, sometimes there's life game players and sometimes Infect is the only way out. And so having an Infect card in a deck, I have no qualms against that. And also partially because I love Infect, but if I die to Infect, I also understand like it's a necessary like safety valve on the format sometimes.
I think, using this extreme example of this one place that has an infamous ban list and extra rules and whatnot, it's not really about that one store so much as this is just this happens to be a big example that we could use as a springboard or a doorway into discussing our reactions to various house rules that we personally don't vibe with, and to examine why it is that we don't vibe with them. There are a lot of house rules that I can get on board with, but there are some house rules that feel like an overreaction or an overreach. If I encounter a group that says no Infect, then that's the kind of thing that I don't think I'm going to be game for. And it's good to know that about myself beforehand. And it's not even like I play Infect cards. I don't. But I have absolutely had games with Infect that were really exciting games. I like Craig Blanchett. I like Mr. Infect. I think his decks are charming. Or a more talked about variant on this is house ruling poison to 20 counters instead of 10 counters. So not eliminating Infect entirely, but extending how much is necessary to KO a person. I'm not going to belittle anyone about this kind of rule or make fun of them or anything, but I do know that is not going to be my people. I know something there just will not mesh with me. I don't think that Infect is OP enough to warrant any rules rewrites. As a personal supporting data point on that, last year, only one of my 200-ish games was ended as a result of Infect. I'll put that data on the screen. Go check out that episode analyzing the game results. It's great. Or there are some places that house rule no counterspells allowed, and that is not a place I want to be either. I'm not trying to play 30 counterspells in a deck or whatever, but I do want to be able to enjoy the types of gameplay situations that can be created or solved or whatever by the fact that counterspells exist. I think they add such a delicious tension to the game.
I mean, really, instead of just having a healthy pregame conversation, a Rule Zero talk, you're making these broad and sweeping rules for, in this case, it's an entire, patronage of an entire LGS. And that's where I kind of feel like this is overly sweeping because, even Dana hates Cascade. We talked about it on the SALT score episode last week. But he's also not going to say people should never do it. He's not full out saying this should be banned and I never want to come across it again.
All of this to say is just that the point of mentioning some of these house rules that we perceive as too much, ones that we're not game for, is that, for me at least, if something that could be frustrating comes up in a game, a strong Infect moment, a devastatingly timed counterspell, a huge Cascade or Storm turn, or whatever it is, my reaction to that kind of thing is 9 times out of 10 is that I'm going to focus on how I can take that moment and level myself up somehow.
Sure, all the time.
Rather than attempting to curb someone else, trying to say, no combo, no Cascade, no poison, or things like that, the response that I think is healthiest for me is trying to turn my focus to how it is that I can analyze the things that made those cards strong in those moments, and then use that knowledge to best them next time. How can I use this to level up is a philosophy that I think makes me a better gamer, and that's just something I wanted to give voice to.
Well, and Joe, I think this is the point in time where we can start to qualify and just need to make it just known throughout the rest of the episode. If these rules that we're going to talk about work for you and your play group, then by all means, run with it, do your thing. But these are definitely exceptions versus the norm. Again, like Magic is all about self-expression, and in the spirit of the format, like play the things and the rules that make sense for you and your dedicated play group. But I'm also going to give the counterpoint. I'm very glad this is not the standard and the rules that we have to follow when we go to Magic cons or play with strangers, because there's a lot of actually fun cards on here too.
I guess, like, to your point, Matt, like, yeah, if it works for your group, then of course, by all means, no one's going to bust down your door and say that you're playing Magic wrong. That doesn't make any sense. But the more of these types of rules that you have, the harder it is for you to acquire new players into that group. And that's where I start to feel more than a bit weird about situations like this, because the more extreme that gate can be, the more it will feel like it is gatekeeping, I guess.
I totally get where you're coming from, because I think I'm siding there too, because it doesn't just stop or start and end with Cascade or Infect or anything like that. So there's just so many things I see on this specific list. I'm just kind of scratching my head, and I'm honestly, like, I'm kind of glad this isn't my LGS, and I feel really bad for saying that. But
sure,
again, if it works for those people, it works for those people, and I'm glad they have that play group. But I'm also, like I said, I'm very glad this is the exception and not the norm.
Yeah, as you say, Matt, find what works for your play group. But, in that, remember also that you are an important part of your play group, Finding what works for everyone can be really tough, especially if when you're trying to figure that out with everyone, you discover that it feels like there are expectations to conform to something like that. Like, I think a lot of folks may find themselves in positions where it feels like they either have to put up with extreme house rules or they just don't get to play Magic at all. It's just one or the other. And that's always a bummer.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess whenever you're trying to renegotiate what it is that, quote, works for your play group, if people do or don't want certain rules, I find that trying to hear others out and where they're coming from means that they're more likely to hear you out too. And overall, I also hope it's helpful to hear that even if it turns out that Group X isn't your people, that means that there is going to be space to discover that Group Y or Group Z might end up being your people instead.
Right.
Got a little deep in it there. And Matt, we slung through a couple of extreme examples just now, but there are still plenty more to dig into. So, kind of related to these would be the idea that it can be a bit more popular in some groups would be like no combos of any sort.
Sure. That's way more normal than I would say than some of these other lists on the Gamers Wharf ban list.
How do you feel about it? Is that the kind of thing that you're game for?
Depends on the bracket. And I think that the bracket has changed so much of these conversations. If we're playing at bracket 2, kind of that pre-con level, and a lot of bracket 3 decks even at that point, combo, at least to me, okay, there's two things kind of going on there. Are you comboing or are you tutoring for the combos? If it's an organic thing, sure. A combo sometimes, games got to end. I have some combos in bracket 3, but I'm also not tutoring for them. I'm not using game changers to dig out the best and most efficient thing to kind of do that exact thing every single time I can. And it's also part of my pregame conversation. Like, I have this in the deck and it's bracket 3, it's following every other rule other than that, and I'm not tutoring to find that. If it's bracket 4, go for it. That's kind of the point of bracket 3 versus bracket 4 in my mind.
Yeah. I feel like for what I'm going to say here, bracket 4, it's literally described as like a no holds barred thing, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Putting an extra restriction on that doesn't make any sense to me. So a house rule for a bracket 4 or bracket 5 space, I think that those places exist to literally not be house ruled. They're just like, no, we're trying to like, we're trying to win here, so let's do it with like these rails that we have here currently. So this is much more about, I feel like house rules are invoked a lot more when trying to navigate the woes that can sometimes come up in the more casual spaces. To that end, something like no combos, I understand where it comes from, but I do think that I think that there can be a very healthy space for combo, and I've made videos on this channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll link some in the description about the ways that combo can actually be quite enticing and interesting as a narrative throughout a game, especially if people are working to try and stop you. I think that there's a lot of fun elements that can come from a combo territory. I am probably a little bit more likely to say, like, if one day, like tomorrow, my playgroup just said, hey, no more tutors, no more searching libraries for cards and stuff, that's the kind of thing I think I would be a lot more game for. Because while I think that the tension can totally exist in some gameplay that exists with combos, tutors to me sort of have the opposite effect, where I'm just like, the tension's been taken out of the game a little bit, and we know exactly how this is about to play out. I think that one of those is something I'd be a little bit more personally game for than the other were I to be presented with it.
Well, and yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different factors with the combo argument specifically, especially at bracket 3. I'm going to say no brackets 2 deck should really have combos. That to me, that defeats the purpose. But at bracket 3, how staunchly are you defending that combo 2? Are you giving people 0 interaction points because you're casting like a Teferi that's going to make sure people can only operate at sorcery speed? Or are you going to make sure that you know people have a lot of opportunities? Like if it's some wackadoo 8-piece combo that like takes forever and you have every opportunity to do, you can sneeze and disrupt the combo, then like sure, go for it. I love a Rube Goldberg machine too. Yeah. But if it's I'm setting up these big pillow fort barriers to lock you out of the game and then I'm going to combo out, if you're doing it at bracket 3, that's where I kind of start to give the side eye. So yeah, it really depends on like, are you tutoring for it? Are you doing the like as soon as possible? And how fiercely are you defending that combo? Those are the questions I want to ask when I'm, at least for myself, putting a combo piece into a bracket 3 deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Are there other things that sometimes come up that you're a little bit like, maybe I would be game for this type of rule? I'm kind of curious in this subject of just like eliminating wholesale entire mechanics like Infect or entire card types, combos, counterspells, stuff like that. Are there ones where you're a little bit more agreeable, do you think?
This one I'm torn on, and I don't mean to throw Ben Brode under the bus, but it's one that comes up all the time, and you know exactly what I'm saying. Joey, I know you know what I'm saying. No commander damage is something that I know it feels like it waxes and wanes when it comes to popularity, but a lot of people seem to think that this is taken away from commander a little bit, and I personally don't remember the last time even that commander damage came up outside of like a dedicated aggro deck where it didn't matter if it was going to be 21 or 40 life anyways. That commander was going to hit you for 80 and you're going to be dead no matter what.
Gotcha. This is not a road down which I may follow one Benjamin Brode, infamous commander damage hater. I quite enjoy commander damage, but also I'm probably biased in my play group. Like my mom has a Voltron deck. It's Dragonlord Ojutai. Folks should check out the list. It's a really good deck. Mm-hmm. So I've always kind of been partial to commander damage as a concept. I know that, there are going to be times where it like doesn't even freaking matter. So it just feels like one more thing to track. So I get it. Like it's tedious. Yeah. I understand why people be like, can we just not even bother? I do totally understand where that comes from. But if I'm the person who's doing the commander damage and I'm responsible for keeping track of it, I personally enjoy it. So like wholesale eliminating that isn't my vibe, but it is regardless very fun to rankle Mr. Benjamin Brode just on the subject at all times anyway. So but it is an interesting one, and I do get why a lot of people feel like it is a tedious or not very relevant game mechanic most of the time. So I understand where people are coming from with it, but it's not a thing that I subscribe to personally.
As somebody who also has some Voltron decks, like I've got Arden and Kedis, I've got some decks that like to win through commander damage. First off, there are so many apps out there. If you say commander damage is hard to track, if you're using a live tracker app, everyone worth using in 2025 has some way to track commander damage. It's like, I've never come up with that. Or if there isn't a way, if everybody's using dice and pen and paper, as the Voltron player, I feel like I'm kind of the one who is obligated to keep track of that and communicate that throughout. So like, if you're playing the commander Voltron deck, track it for everybody else then if they think it's too much work, to make sure that you're not inconveniencing other people. And I know one thing that Dana said last week too was, don't play a deck that makes me do homework. And if that is commander damage for you, do the homework for your friend. And so that the way you can still do what you want to do. So commander damage, as we've been talking, I think I've talked myself out of it. I'm still thumbs down on getting rid of commander damage. Yeah. Because I think still too, like it's the same reason I don't mind Infect. It's a safety valve that like is going to make sure that games don't go on in perpetuity because somebody was happened to assemble some massive life game combo. Yeah, that's just it. But it is the type of thing that if I heard that there was like a playgroup that is doing house rule no commander damage, I get where you're coming from. It's not personally going to be my vibe, but like if it doesn't come up in enough of your games, I sort of it's not as extreme as some of the other stuff I guess that we've mentioned before. So yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, a lot more gray here. We do have some others to get into that I'm excited to hear your thoughts on, but right now I think we're going to have to do a quick pause to challenge some stats. It's about that time in the episode where we acknowledge that there's so much data on EDHREC that we don't always agree with. So in addition to looking at these house rules, how about we also challenge those numbers? This episode is brought to you by NordVPN. Digital security is no joke. One day you're using public Wi-Fi, and then the next you find out that your connection was not that secure after all, and now hackers have access to your logins. And I don't know about you, but my bank details, my passwords, my online identity is not the kind of thing that I want other folks messing with. And NordVPN helps you with exactly that. It's premium security for just the price of a cup of coffee per month. Or perhaps you could say for the price of a booster pack per month, maybe. That's a small price to pay for a very big relief, if you ask me. It's like card sleeves. We protect our valuable cards. We should protect our valuable information, too. NordVPN protects you wherever you are in the world. One account can be used on up to 10 devices, and their threat protection feature protects you from viruses, vicious malware, and phishing sites. To get the best discount off of your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/EDHREC. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. Once again, that's nordvpn.com/EDHREC for 4 extra months off of the 2-year plan. Thank you so much to NordVPN for sponsoring the show. A new era of power has arrived with the Alienware Area 51 gaming laptops, intentionally engineered to push more power to the CPU and GPU for maximum performance. Combined with the Intel Core Ultra 9 processors, merging CPU, NPU, and integrated GPU into one AI-optimized chip, it delivers fast, smart, and seamless performance across everything you do. And with the new cryo chamber design, airflow is focused exactly where it's needed most. Fused with Alienware's enhanced thermal solutions, it creates a higher power output without raising noise levels, allowing you to play with confidence even during the most demanding marathon gaming sessions. So no matter what you're playing, Alienware ensures every game runs precisely as its developers intended. A new era of power is here. All you have to do is take it. Discover Area 51 today at www.alienware.com/area-51laptops.
All right, Joey, well, I'll get us started off this week. So my challenge is for a new commander that came out in the Spider-Man set. It is Hydro-Man Fluid Felon. It is double blue for a 2/2 elemental villain that says whenever you cast a blue spell, if Hydro-Man is a creature, he gets +1/+1 till end of turn, and at the beginning of your end step, untap Hydro-Man until the end of turn, or until your next turn, I should say. He becomes a land that gains tap for a blue mana. So this is a pretty aggressive commander. If you look at it, you're playing a bunch of ways to pump Hydro-Man up, make him unblockable, and it's pretty straightforward game plan. So one card that I do want to point out is actually not working with Hydro-Man because the way that the mechanic on the card works is Slip Through Space. It is 1 blue for a sorcery that says target creature can't be blocked this turn and draw a card, which at first glance makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't I want this in a deck that's all about drawing cards, making things unblockable? But the line on Slip Through Space that I left out until now is devoid, which means this card has no color. And because Slip Through Space has no color to it, it's not going to trigger Hydro-Man's ability to get +1/+1 till end of turn, because it specifically says when you cast a blue spell, he gets the trigger there. So because Slip Through Space has no color, it's not going to proc that. And 23% of decks are currently playing Slip Through Space. That's a pretty big number for a card that actually doesn't work the way that people want it to. So if you are playing Hydro-Man Fluid Felon and you are one of the 23% of people who put Slip Through Space in the deck, take it out. It's going to make it unblockable. It's going to draw you a card, but there's a ton of other ways to do what Slip Through Space could be doing for you that are actually going to proc Hydro-Man's trigger. So make sure you're just paying attention to Devoid. It's a thing that doesn't come up very often, but in this case, it comes up and it's going to be relatively relevant. So give yourself a second glance when you're playing Slip Through Space and Hydro-Man decks.
I'll move to my challenge next. This is our listener challenge, and it is submitted by Drew Hendricks, who wanted to talk about Phylath World Sculptor. This is a Gruul landfall commander that I think is honestly deeply underrated. It is basically an Avenger of Zendikar in the command zone. A 6-mana 5/5 elemental. When it hits the field, you create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each basic land that you control. And landfall, whenever you get a land onto your side of the field, you put 4 +1 counters onto a plant that you control. When this hits the field, you are making so many bodies. And yes, it is restricted to only counting your basic lands, but honestly, that just encourages good landfall playing habits, in my opinion. I think this commander is very underrated, only about 2,100 decks to its name so far, but if you've played against it, you know it's quite good. And Drew Hendricks here has a great challenge for a card that is underplayed in this commander, and that's the card Devilish Valet, a 3-mana 1/3 Devil Warrior with Trample and Haste, and the ability, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, double Devilish Valet's power until end of turn. You have this in play, you cast Phylath, even if you are only making like 5 other tokens or something like that from Phylath's trigger, that is going to be Phylath and 5 tokens, 6 triggers for Devilish Valet to double its power. I'm not doing the math here for you. This is exponentially, like, absolutely wild. This is a delete button for target player in this deck, and it's only showing up in 61 of them so far. So Drew, I love this suggestion. All you Phylath players out there, give Devilish Valet a look.
Yeah, that's a really good synergy there. Good shout there. So if you would like to pick up any Devilish Valets for your Phylath deck or a replacement for Slip Through Space in those Hydra Man decks, make sure you check out cardsphere.com. It is the best way to get cards out there. I've already been sending out and receiving cards from Spider-Man. It is such a quick way to turn around and get cards from pre-release weekend, getting them into decks. I mean, I'm sure Dana has all sorts of cards he was able to get before MagicCon Atlanta, even when he left, by going through CardSphere. So if you want to check out CardSphere for yourself, head to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast and try it out. It's just a fantastic way to turn your unplayed cards into played cards. You're going to turn them into cards that you actually are going to want to use for yourself. So again, that's cardsphere.com/EDHRECast.
Heck yeah. Okay, Matt, let's get back into our show here, talking about some house rules. An interesting thing that I think it sort of characterizes a lot of house rules is that some of them can start to feel like very extreme responses to some unsavory game situations. So we've discussed a few that it feels like the brackets do kind of handle for you. But here's another one that feels maybe like an overcorrection to me, is that in some groups, it's uncouth to ever destroy any lands at all. Not just MLD, mass land denial type of things, but even like generous gifting a land or even using a strip mine on a land is the kind of thing that can be like house banned out of those games. That feels like an extreme response to me. I'm wondering how you feel.
It does feel a little extreme to me, basically giving every land indestructible. That kind of just opens the door to play really overpowered lands that otherwise you might want to get rid of. So if somebody plays like Growing Rites of Azcanta and they want to flip it over, I mean, that just means they have a Gaia's Cradle the rest of the game. And I mean, you're going to want to blow that up. You're not going to want me to have a Gaia's Cradle on the battlefield. So there's all sorts of different lands that I think, just as the card pool has gotten bigger and bigger, there's more and more lands that you do want to be able to answer for, whether it's a generous gift or, I mean, even a Tectonic Edge. And I don't think Tectonic Edge is necessarily overpowered by any means.
No. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's not destroying any lands, period. I do struggle with that a little bit because also, like, what if there's a command, like you want to play the commander, what is it? The Simic commander that is a Kraken, but also starts as a land.
Oh, Ricksmithies. Yeah.
Yeah, Ricksmithies. Yeah. If you want to make the argument, like, I'll just play Ricksmithies. It is a land. You can't blow it up. I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's always the thing with some of these house rules, is that any additional barriers that you put into the game sometimes can come off as another way that players could angle shoot. And that's always a worry with me in the back of my mind with house rules, is that the more of those things that you have, the more it almost invites players to solve a new puzzle. Because we're players, of course we're going to find ways of gaming a system. That's what Magic is to some extent, is us trying to find the best way to get around some of these restrictions that we do have. Like, there is joy to solving that type of puzzle. So of course our brains are naturally inclined to try and figure that out.
Yeah.
But the more of them there are, the more it suddenly comes off as though we're not solving fun puzzles. We're angle shooting ways that then robs our focus of what the point of the game is supposed to be, which is like sharing a joyful time with other folks. So yeah, the not destroying any lands isn't my vibe either.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs down. I understand if you don't want any mass land destruction, that's fine, but that's also just say like we're only going to play brackets 2, and that's kind of self-regulates there
you go.
Without overcorrecting, and there's a lot of collateral damage when you make sweeping rules like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it feels like an overcorrection to me, and yeah, I'm not game for it. What do you think about something that, instead of taking away cards from a card pool, actually adds more in? For instance, allowing sideboards in a game for the purposes of cards like Lessons, which can find a card from outside the game, or Sponsor of Ulamog is another one that lets you play a bunch of Eldrazi from outside the game, or Wish type of cards that do grab a thing from outside and let you play those.
Yeah.
Where are you at with expanding the card pool in that way instead of restricting it?
Typically, if somebody says in our pregame conversation, I have a deck, it does this, and they tell me about it, I can opt in. And most of the time, I'm going to opt in. I'm not going to tell people no, especially like if it's a one thing. I just want to play this one deck, and then we'll go back to, kind of normal. But if you have that Rule Zero deck and you are communicative about it, I'm not going to tell you no. Cool, you went through the effort to build this deck. Just tell me ahead of time. That's the biggest thing. And with so many of these rules in general, the more proactive you are about telling people and just getting people on your side, really, which like you have to politic before the game starts and just say like, hey, I have this deck and it does a Rule Zero thing. Is that cool? Sure, go for it. But giving people the opportunity to opt out of that's probably the most common thing is like, hey, I have this deck. It has 2 wish cards because I'm tutoring for like some wackadoo thing. I'm not going to tell you no.
I think the wackadoo is actually like the perfect word for this because the sillier it is, the more inclined I think everyone will be to let you bend rules in that way. If you're asking to bend rules for the purposes of something broken, then it's kind of like, all right, what point are we proving here? That doesn't feel in the spirit of this. But
no.
That bend of just like, all right, can I do it because I think there's something silly here? I'm especially going to be a lot more game for those. This is one that gets a really big thumbs up from me. I don't want to normalize the idea of sideboards in Commander, not by any means. But I do look at some of those cards, like those wish cards, and I'm kind of like, man, I remember just playing at home and wanting to go like, oh, I'm going to play this and grab, I've got this one thing like in the binder way back there. This will be so weird if I can actually pull this off. There's a nice energy to that type of gameplay to me sometimes. Or what is it, Sponsor of Ulamog, that just like you pay 20 mana and tear a hole in reality and just throw a bunch of Eldrazi onto the battlefield. That strikes me as funny. So this is the kind of thing that if someone wanted to bend the rules in that way, I have no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's just me personally. I would never speak for a whole group. But to me, I'm kind of like, all right, yeah, let's see what you got, is my immediate impression when I hear it.
But see, so if you're doing that and like you sponsor, because I have Sponsor of Ulamog in a deck, but that should be just because I can pay some mana to make scions and spawns and everything. That's what I want to do in my Raga Draga deck.
Yes.
I'm not tutoring for anything or grabbing stuff from outside the game. But if you're going to play that deck and you're telling people ahead of time and like, okay, I'm going to activate Sponsire, and you just like pull out a binder and start reading from a book and that's your hand, go for it. Make it a shtick. That's totally fun. Like, have fun with it. But like, if you're doing it to be sweaty about it, that's it. I'm kind of like, or even then, like if you say like, hey, I'm doing this thing and you break my trust, you take advantage of me kind of letting you roll with the Rule Zero, and it's actually a lot more cutthroat than you present it. That's where I'm going to be much more hesitant to go along with, hey, this is my Rule Zero deck. Like, well, no, because I'm not playing a Rule Zero deck to accommodate that either. So don't break my trust. And typically this is where this is the most lenient I am, because I'm not going to do it myself. But if you tell me about it, most of the time I'm going to go along.
I think that's a really important point to inject into the conversation here, actually, is that like a house rule is the kind of thing that should be continually negotiated. I'm not saying that you must always talk about it every single time. If you've got your set play group that you're always doing this thing and that is like an established norm, obviously that's kind of the point of house rules, that you don't have to negotiate it every single time. But everyone should feel comfortable to bring that back to the table if they feel that they need to. A Rule Zero conversation has always been the type of thing that like allows people to present new ideas rather than anyone enforcing their version of the game onto other people. So if something like that you just described does happen, that suddenly makes another person feel a little bit like, I don't know if this is really in the spirit of the rule that we thought it was going to be. Maybe I've therefore changed my mind as a result of this new information I've just got. Like, they should be very much comfortable to bring that up and to then not want to have that be as much a rule anymore. Like that strikes me as very fair to like keep in mind about these house rule type of conversations, is that like they can be renegotiated. That's healthy.
But just have a little bit of self-awareness about knowing what you're asking players to opt into. And that's the kind of the biggest disconnect that I see, is somebody will come in, hey, I have this thing and it's completely unreasonable, but I want you to go along with it. Well, do you really understand what you're asking us to do? And that's kind of the biggest disconnect that I have seen. But if you are acting in good faith, then typically like I'm going to be lenient. I'm going to let you go along and do your thing, because again, we're doing all these things that we can't do in other formats anyways, and we want to do this together. And so I don't want to overly police things, but at the same time, like I got to protect my own experiences too.
Yeah, I feel that. And there are, I think, some of these. The experiences that we don't get in a lot of other places feels like a great focus to put a lot of these house rules as well. That's why, to me, the idea of like outside the game cards and inviting that possibility back into the game strikes me as interesting. It's creating something rather than removing something. I think even potentially if a playgroup had wanted to discuss the idea of just like hybrid mana and its color identity, that's the kind of conversation that I feel like it can be very open to personally, because I like the idea of like potentially being able to add more. But then, of course, if they're doing it to abuse something, then that's a little bit less fun. But like the addition stuff we're adding a little bit more in tends to be the kind of thing that I notice myself being a little bit more receptive to, which is just an observation about myself that I'm kind of like realizing as we discuss.
I mean, so you're talking about rules that are adding things in, and this is one that actually I very recently am starting to battle with, but uncards and silver border cards in general.
Ooh.
That seems to be something that players have gone back and forth on for a long time, and I've never had a Rule Zero deck until MagicCon Atlanta, because Joey, you and I got a chance to play in Gavin's Unknown event, and he always does these wacky, random, legendary cards for like memes and people in the community. Well, EDHREC, we got onto one of those cards, and I happened to open one in my pack, so I built my first Rule Zero deck, and I'm super excited about it, but I also like don't know how to like reasonably expect like what other uncards can I include, because this is the whole basis of the deck is functioning outside of the norm, and so uncards in general, are you typically on board with it? How do people need to present it to you in order to give your good graces?
That's a really interesting point. And I do want to shout out, the Commander Recommender card from the Unknown event is very cool.
So it's so silly.
There's a Scryfall page for it. I'm excited to see the deck that you put together for this. Link that to us as soon as you can, Matt. I really want to see that.
Well, it's mono blue, and that's totally outside my wheelhouse. And so it's a rough work in progress, but it'll get there.
Yes. I kind of immediately, once you brought it up, I noticed within myself, my reaction being, I've played against several uncommanders, silver-bordered commanders. There's a black-red Baron who eventually, if you play a certain sequence of numbers, will, quote, destroy target player. And that's very funny to me. I quite enjoy the dynamic that can be brought with some of these uncommanders. I feel like I have a different response to seeing an uncommander in the command zone, and I tend to be very game for that. I know exactly what it is as soon as it's there. I have a different response to that versus uncards in the 99, though. That one I would feel like I would ask a lot more follow-up questions. It's kind of my immediate reaction, I think. I'm more likely to see an uncommander and be like, all right, I see how this, like, people are going to find the fun from this, and we all seem to know exactly what we're game for, compared to who the heck knows when and what could happen and when it will come up and all of that.
Well, and it's so hard for me to just have one hard and cut line, because some uncards aren't that bad, actually. They're like, the Sword of Dungeons and Dragons has kind of become a normal card at this point, because all you're doing is rolling dice, which we do anyways.
Yes.
But then there's some cards that like get a Nerf gun, and how far can you shoot the card from? Like, that's where I'm kind of like,
dislike button.
Again, well, as Dana said, like, don't make me do homework. Don't bring things outside of the normal rules of how just Magic cards should operate. And so if you're playing that in the 99 and you're not telling me ahead of time, I'm going to be pretty annoyed. I'm going to be honestly kind of ticked off. I'm like, okay, your playing cards aren't legal and using different deck building restrictions. I think this is another thing that applies to the proxy conversation too, where like if you tell me about proxies ahead of time, I'm not going to care. But if you come in, you proxy an entire deck, and it's like, especially when it's like obviously like above and beyond budget, power level, anything like that. If we came in with the same knowledge ahead of time, that's one thing. But either let me opt in or communicate well beyond like in the deck construction process. And uncards and proxies kind of fall in the same thing. If you tell me about it, I'm probably not going to tell you no. But if you're just like springing things on me, like, that's when I'm going to like side eye a little bit more, because that's, again, you're playing with different rules than I knew we were going to be playing under.
I definitely see playgroups will say either no proxies allowed at all, or like an infinite proxy number can be allowed. Both of those, again, kind of calling back to an earlier part of the conversation, feel like very extreme responses to something unsavory that has happened in past games. And I worry about the extremity of some of those types of responses. It is the kind of thing that I don't think deserves an extreme response. It can be a very heated topic online indeed, because sometimes we do see that people will...
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess over proxy can be the word for the bracket that they're playing in, where it's just like, this is... It seems as though you're proxying beyond the scope of the playgroup here, and that's not a very healthy thing for the entire group. It could potentially promote an arms race or just feelings of other folks who are just like, well, that's not the type of game that I thought we all wanted to play. But then also not allowing any proxies ever doesn't feel like a correct move to me either. All of us have done that to test stuff even, So
yeah, both extremes aren't the answer. I know that for sure. I have this deck that I'm trying out and I couldn't find these like 7 cards in my deck. I just proxied them for tonight or whatever. That's fine. And I know some people, a lot of the Discord that I've seen around is like, okay, like I'll let people proxy on, like, as long as they're like intending on buying the cards, whatever. Again, whatever works for your playgroup. If you and your playgroup, like everybody's like tight on money and you need to proxy everything, that's cool. Just like communicate that with each other too. And again, it's whatever you're telling people, just make sure you're following through. And if you don't want to proxy, that's fine. I like I said, I don't think that's the right way. And I can admit too, you kind of mentioned these are over corrections to a past experience. Mm-hmm. I fully know the example that I gave of like somebody sitting down with an overpowered and overtuned fully proxy deck. That's a trauma response on me. I can acknowledge that. But at the same time, like, just tell people like, hey, I have these few cards proxied and this is why they make sense for my deck. I'm not going to tell you no. Again, just tell me what I'm signing up for ahead of the game so I can say no if it sounds too scary.
Yeah, a house rule that comes up in the middle of a game, never going to be the move.
That's you're always going to go south with that, 100%.
Yeah, and that's again one of those things that like house rules as a topic, I'm just like, there's got to be a very large amount of clear communication with folks because the point of any rule should be to invite people in rather than excluding them all of the dang time. To kind of go off of this into a less extreme example, one that has come up plenty of times for me is this very casual, like, you've missed a couple of land drops, go get a land, dude. Like, that's a thing that I've seen happen plenty of times, and it's very clearly outside of the rules of Magic. So if someone misses multiple land drops, 2, 3, whatever, people will pick a number, letting them just go and find one. Replacing whatever they draw is just like, no, that wasn't on top of your library. Put a land on top of your library. That's what you do this turn instead. That's a thing that I've seen. And because I play at probably a very beer and pretzels vibe most of the time, it doesn't tend to bother me. Specifically when like the group invites them to do it rather than a person requesting, hey, can I do this? It's kind of a very polite society type of thing. But I don't know. I could easily see people going back and forth on that because to an extent, it is the type of thing that encourages bad deck building, right? So I can see why people also be a little bit like, hey, don't normalize this. So there's always going to be nuance attached to every single one of these, even if they feel casual in my brain. Yeah,
the grabbing somebody's third land for them, I've done that multiple times. Like if it's turn 6 and they said like, okay, like I'm not sure, but yeah, let's go with it. And they get 2 lands and that's it. Turn 6, like I'm going to grab you land. I want you to play the game. I don't sit there. And especially, again, bracket 3 and below, I'm not going to make you get punished. But if somebody like openly is like, okay, like this is risky, but I think it's going to work out. And then it doesn't, like if they're willingly going for it, that's when I'm like, okay, like you said, like, okay, you had a turn 1 Soul Ring, but you didn't have a second land.
Yeah.
That's where I'm especially like, no, like you know what you were doing. But if somebody's like, I don't love this, but like, okay. And you don't, like, if you're not casting any spells by turn 5, like I'm going to grab you a land. I want you to be able to play the game. That's the whole point of why we're building these decks anyways.
I guess kind of like putting into focus here, a large part of our focus indeed seems to be ways of sanding off some of the potential rougher edges, just a little like social lubricant or whatever you could say that allows for the nice game that we all want it to be, the focus of the evening to actually occur. And there are just sometimes things that you bump on. When that, I think, remains your like sort of North Star, I think a lot of these can feel very organic and very easy. But then if that stops being your North Star, if these rules, again, do start to feel like a way that someone could game a system, for instance, that's where it starts to get a little bit like, oh, no. Which, again, we as Magic players are constantly trying to find new cool synergies and ways to, get around restrictions and stuff like that. So, of course, our brains inevitably err towards that. But I don't want to be too distracted by those. I do want to keep my eyes focused on the like, how can we create a good evening for everyone here that is involved? So,
yeah, for sure. So another house rule that I know had a little bit of steam, but I haven't seen any discussion around it for a while, was fixing the first player problem, where the person who goes first is usually at a pretty massive advantage because you get to draw your card in 1v1 formats. And you can have some very powerful starts. So the person that goes fourth, like you're kind of sit there twiddling your thumbs a little bit. So I know some people have instituted some random rules, like the player who goes second gets to scry 1, the person who goes third gets to scry 2, and then scry 3 for the fourth player after they keep their hands to start their main phase, whatever. Have you ever done anything like that to kind of take care of that first player problem?
So I am personally, and this might come as a shock to a lot of people, I'm very opposed to this, actually.
Okay.
So the power balancing going first idea, like as you said, yes, it is unusual that in a multiplayer game, the first person does draw, as opposed to in a one-on-one game, the first player doesn't draw. In games of CEDH, folks have done stats on this where the person who goes first does get a win percentage increase compared to the person going in fourth. It is demonstrable there that in a version of the game that has very few turns to it, having potentially one more turn than someone else could absolutely make all of the difference. However, I'm going to go with some of the stats that I pulled over my last year of tracking my games, which again is largely contained to like the bracket 2 and bracket 3 space. I did not, across my hundreds of games, notice a significant impact on player order affecting win percentage. I'll go through some quick numbers here. Player 1 actually won 23% of the time in my games last year. Player 2 won 27% of the time. Player 3 won 26%, and Player 4 won 24% of the time. So to me, in those bracket areas, I'm not convinced yet personally that there would need to be a rule to, quote, correct a power balance of going first in, again, those areas. To me, this does not feel like something that would be necessary based off of my data that I've been collecting over my games.
Yeah, and again, for everybody that I know is going to jump to, well, how big is the data set? Like, it's anecdotal for sure, but I mean, still, it's something a little more reliable than gut feelings and, well, I think this way, therefore. I'm not sure how I feel, and I'm kind of torn because I understand the intent behind it, because people are right, especially if you get a really good first couple turns and you're going first, having one more turn effectively than the person who goes third and fourth, for example, that makes a huge difference. And so I do think that at the CEDH level, I really struggle with it, because that's the whole point of playing CEDH, is to play to the most extremes within like the current rule set that exists. And so making adjustments specifically for CEDH, I struggle with a little bit, honestly. Mm-hmm. But again, if you're playing like kitchen table, it's only ever you and three of your buddies, and this is what you decide to do, I'm not going to be surprised, because I think there are cases that like this makes sense. But CEDH specifically, I do really start to struggle with having some sort of advantages for the people who don't go first.
Once you increase the numbers on how many people would, for instance, scry, based off of, this example of like later players getting to scry more. Once you increase the numbers, you are beginning to sculpt things in a way that I'm just like, that doesn't feel better. That like starts to make me feel a little bit worried about the direction or things that the game could go. So I don't think this is a gross overcorrection in the way that like a 200 card ban list is a gross overcorrection to some response.
What?
Like, I absolutely see where this comes from. I would want to see a lot more data from a lot more sources about whether or not the power balance of going first is in fact an issue for games of Commander. I have my data set. I would want to see other data sets for sure. I am not trying to say that mine is a universal experience. I just also want to make sure that we're not just going off of the vibes that this could be an issue. I would like personally, I would be most convinced by seeing, no, definitely there's going to be an issue in these bracket 2 and bracket 3 spaces, that this is the kind of thing that could really warrant some extra attention towards. And I'm not personally, I feel like I haven't personally seen that just yet to warrant a rules change in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joey, are there any more of these rules, these house rules, that you kind of discovered in doing research for this episode that you just had like a guttural reaction one way or another?
One that I honestly feel like is actually kind of nice is some, I guess you could call it like mess cleaning up in some ways. A very common example of this, I think, would be like the day and night werewolves and the nightbound day-bound werewolves, those being two different things, is a little bit like, it is one of those.
It's very, very confusing.
It's
for sure.
It's just annoying. So to me, if a werewolf player were to be like, hey, can just all of my werewolves have day-bound, nightbound? I would say yes, personally, in a heartbeat, because I don't want to have to do the homework of their stuff. That the fact that those two things do operate in different ways is a little bit tedious to me personally. So if someone was playing werewolves and they did have that slight discrepancy, unifying it into one thing, making a quick errata for the sake of ease in this game, that's the kind of thing that does make sense to my brain. So little messy stuff like that you can clean up for the sake of ease of everyone else's mental during the game, that's the kind of thing that does make sense to me, I think. How about you?
I think that should just have been a rule to begin with, and there should have been a lot more errata. But I am on board with this house rule 100%. It just for clarity's sake, make the werewolves all function the same way.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, so there was one that I saw on a Reddit thread, and I know source material, but there was a couple lists that I just could not fathom and comprehend.
Yeah.
And maybe this is for playgroups that are significantly more casual than the two of us, but there were some no kindred decks, no typal decks. GTFO, mate.
We're cutting back into the deep end. We did look through a couple of Reddit threads here, and we
found some bad ones.
Yeah,
and we did it so that you folks out there in listener land don't have to. But if you see somebody that said you cannot counter commanders,
right? That was another one. Why?
I would be building so many problematic commander decks. I don't love counterspells just because my stuff gets countered more often than not. Yeah, I'm a Selesnya guy. I understand the importance for counterspells, though. And so having a rule like no counterspells, I've seen some rules like that, but specifically no countering commanders,
I'm not
no.
Yeah.
I if that was a store rule, I would leave that store
completely.
Like that, just to me, that means, especially for the established playgroup of the people that are playing there routinely, that know that ahead of time, they're going to be building some degenerate stuff. And that's the problem that I feel when stores specifically have these over corrections when it comes to house rules, because like a new person comes in that has never been to that store before, like you could just lose them forever. Mm-hmm. And stuff like no typal decks, no countering commanders. Those are two types of rules that I would not go back. I would go find a different play group.
And like even not ones that we see at stores, just like a lot were pitched in various places on the internet, and there are plenty we see that were just like, oh, I don't like one rule of someone saying whenever someone in the group gets hellbent, they run out of cards in hand, you draw back up to 7. I'm like, that's a whole different game.
Absolutely not.
That's a whole new game.
No, you are not playing Magic anymore. Yeah. That is completely. It's crazy. It's crazy to me that that is something, because you can just play some elf deck. You can play, well, if you're not playing kindred decks, but like I'm gonna play a burn deck and I'm just gonna wheel of fortune every turn. I'm gonna that one especially, like some of these rules that. We got into the weeds, folks, and I cannot believe that like this had endorsement.
There was one that said you can't attack someone unless that person has a blocker, and I'm like, no, I don't like that. That's bad, though.
No,
I don't care for that.
That's actively. So some of these, they could be abused.
Quite.
Whether it's, okay, you didn't get your third land, I'm going to grab your land for you, and then they like take off. Sure, you can absolutely like build your deck and abuse that, and if you're doing that and like I pick up on it, I'm only going to give you a game or two, and then I'm going to tell you to fix your ways. If you're playing decks like that, and you are going to build decks to like, you're going to build bad decks because you can take advantage of these rules that you had prior knowledge of. And again, like if I'm walking into a store and they say, okay, you can never attack somebody unless they have a blocker already, that's the most ludicrous rule I can think of, and I just like I'm not gonna.
Cool, I'll build a deck that doesn't have a whole bunch of creatures and is ready to combo out so that no one can attack me. Like this is what we mean when we say that these feels like invitations to break into angle shoot. I don't. Game design is a careful process, you know, and so like if we mess too much with the bounds of reality, some bad things can happen. So that's there are some of these that we found that were a little bit like, oh man, I hope that my brain will recover from having stared into this void. Which is maybe harsh language, but there are things I'm not game for. Thumbs down.
Staring into the void of Reddit rules that people invent. Oh boy, it was a void for sure. I'm really curious, like what listeners are going to tell us in the comments about this episode of like, here's one that my play group thinks is like fairly reasonable, and like that's gonna like cleanse my palate.
Yeah. I do kind of want to return on the subject of like some of these very extreme ones. I want to return to an adage or a principle that I hold that I think we mentioned earlier on in the show. If there are things that happen in a game that can sometimes be frustrating, such as counterspelling my commander, as an example, I personally want to have the mindset that I view those as moments where I have the opportunity to level up in some way. I can, I've been counterspelled in ways that I'm just like, dang it, that's so frustrating. But it is a learning experience for me still. And that is a principle that I try to hold on to guide some of my future play. For the most part, in the bracket 2 and bracket 3 space, we're playing pretty laid back, pretty casual. We're not going super cutthroat. So I'm absolutely going to make a lot of allowances for that in the games that I play too. But also, this is a game that I enjoy improving at, so I want to make sure that I leave myself room to do that rather than wholesale shutting out certain things, because some of those, quote, frustration moments could actually be things that give me an opportunity to get better and to climb over and to come out more improved on the other side of. So,
see, Joey, I would rather ban Pure Imaginative Rascal than get better at this game. That's my take.
We're not going back to that huge ban list, are we now? Is that on that huge ban list? That's wild.
I'm just going to close this window then so that you don't know that I'm trying to ban Vraska Relic Seeker.
Well, there's so many cards on that ban list. It's just like, the only response we have is to laugh at this. Okay, everyone? Like, that's just, because otherwise it makes us feel existential dread. We have to be able to laugh at some of these things.
I mean,
Magic player's wild, man.
Magic player, I mean, it is a captive audience, both the card that is banned and the people that are listening at this point.
So yeah, I hope that this episode has given you some examples of good and bad, as Matt is apparently going to torture me with now for the rest of time. There are some that totally make sense, especially when gameplay, health, and everyone having a good time is your North Star. But there are some responses to that do seem a little bit too extreme. And Matt, I share your curiosity about what our listeners will say as some of their favored or least favorite house rule things that they've seen out there in the wild. I think that there is even more wackiness to come when we start reading through those responses.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
Yeah. With that, I guess we're going to call this episode to a close. If our listeners do want to get in touch with us, Matt, where is it that they can find you online to let you know about a bunch of weird house rules out there?
You can let me know about whatever wacky and wild house rules you have out there. You can find them on pretty much any social media, Instagram, Blue Sky, whatever it is, at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget, we are proud to work with Dragon Shields. You can get their landfall decks and sleeves and everything. It's just, they're so great, folks. They look so good in person. I know I waved them in front of the camera, but like truly, like go check them out. I'm excited for these.
Heck yeah. And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky at Joseph M. Schultz. And you can find the cast online at EDHRECast. And of course, you would like to get access to any, for instance, exclusive content of ours, you can support us over on patreon.com/EDHRECast. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until next time, remember, keep it wackadoo, as Matt says, and also EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.
Well played.